It's time for Type 40, a Doctor Who podcast from the Spacebook for the Fandom Podcast Network with me, Dan Hadley, Birmingham's king of the geeks, and your designated driver. Now, it could be you're completely new to the show, or it's just as likely you've been aboard before. Well, whichever, you'll be safe in the knowledge. This is the free-speaking, big-thinking, eclectic and eccentric show for everyone, whatever decade or century you started watching, reading, or listening along to the timeless adventures of our hero, Doctor Who, and with a new season of Doctor Who itself well underway on BBC One and broadcasters and platforms all over the world, we're making our way through the 6-part run known as Doctor Who Flux, being sure to throw in a few laughs along the way as always. So come and step into our TARDIS and share it all together here with us, Flux by Flux, on Type 40. Yes, back again, and it's fair to say that historically, Doctor Who has challenged us, its audience, with concepts, characters, enigmas, and the odd epic in the past, whether it was 10 whole weeks straight of the War Games or 14 of Trial of a Time Lord, the very question itself of Professor River Song, or there was entropy fields and malignant inner beings, or transcendental interdimensional transportation itself even. But there are few episodes in its entire history, certainly in my living memory, that have received quite the universal double take and a degree of chin stroking as the third part of Flux. Fortunately for me, to review this latest challenge to the sanity and patience from the world's worst showrunner, Chris Chibnall, I've two willing, cleverer, and more learned minds than my own here to guide me through, including my returning co-host, Mr. Simon Horton.
Well, hello, Dan. I was going to say it's lovely to be back. It is lovely to be back. I would like to be talking about something other than episode 3 of Flux, but you know, rough and smooth, it's nice to be here anyway.
I can't believe they've dragged you back in. It's kind of like the Mafia, isn't it, Doctor Who? You said you were out, but you are in.
Yeah, it's really difficult. I mean, I stopped watching, as a lot of people know, I stopped watching Doctor Who halfway through Jodie Whittaker's first series because I just really couldn't take it anymore. I stuck with the whole of Series 12 purely for review purposes to come and do this show. So I actually have no excuse at all as to why I'm watching Series 13, other than, I don't know, it's almost, is it car crash? Is it akin to just kind of watching not being able to not watch a car crash? I think that's possible.
Car crash TV or time ram TV. Something's going on, something very, very slow, quite unpleasant that we somehow can't bring ourselves to tear ourselves away from 100%. Yeah. It's quite excruciating, isn't it? Yeah. But I think that we do have help at hand here because we've used the time scoop to whisk away a mind. He's laughing at us already. It's a mind that is more attuned to focus on the slightly obscure and the absurd, all the way from another planet altogether. It's Svilebetkin, the rabbi from another planet.
Hello, how are you? Lovely to be here. I have to tell you, while I do think everything in the Chibnall-Whittaker era is deeply awful, right? I do, deeply awful.
Fair.
I have found Flux.
It's exciting.
I have found Flux marginally less offensive than the entirety of the rest of the Chibnall-Whittaker era, right? They seem to be focusing less on the Doctor, which is always good, apart from this episode. So, like when you said this episode was universally bad, I don't think it gets anywhere near the depths of the terrible episodes we saw in seasons 11 and 12. I mean, Orphan 55. There is nothing good about that whatsoever.
No, you're quite right. I mean, Orphan 55 isn't just bad Doctor Who; it's bad television. Full stop.
It's bad in every way, shape, and form. Right? This one I get. I mean, it's suffered good it didn't have the doggy in it. I do quite like the doggy. Because it's just I like dogs. What I don't know what to tell you. I think the production design is generally speaking very strong, right? In this season.
I think it's gone up. I think it's gone up generally since Series 11 production design. It isn't something that turns my stomach in the way that the rest of it does.
It does feel like a modern revamp of the Tomorrow People. I'm guessing this look. If I was going to give money to the Tomorrow People and redo it, it would look and feel like this. It doesn't feel like Doctor Who. But yeah, that's Jodie Whittaker. But yeah, I think the reason we're still here, the reason that we're still, most people are still hanging on, is Russell T Davies, because we can see there's another bus coming. And this one might be a bit better. We're staying here because we love Doctor Who and we hope it's going to be better. My God, I've offended Simon so much with my
he's been whisked away. He's been
it was like, they can't do it. Clearly the time scoop has got it. By the way, if I am time scooped, I want the original BBC computer black triangle with the top missing. None of that Mr. Whippy thing. Yeah, no.
Well, while we've got you here, because we've been running these shows for a couple of weeks now, bring us up to speed a little bit. Where did you stand on Chapter 1, the Halloween Apocalypse, and Chapter 2, War of the Sontarans? Because you have been just as critical as we have in your reviews generally over the last couple of years.
I don't think you've ever said that Jodie made you want to vomit in your own mouth. That never happened. But and that flows quite freely with me. I mean, honestly, it's Chibnall has gone to the Alec Kurtzman School of Writing, the J.J. Abrams Alec Kurtzman School of Writing in this season, and trying to do a Moffat pastiche. I think honestly, the 6 episodes leans a lot stronger. The 6 episode one story leans very, very strongly into his writing style. But somebody commented, Dr. Alex, who's doing the far superior season 13. You've got to go check out his YouTube channel because it's like a season. It's like a Capaldi season that he's written, and he's been
dialing
really
back on this entire era, hasn't he? And making it never happened at all.
I really, if you like Capaldi, I really strongly recommend. But he commented when I said it's leaning into his strengths. It's like Del Boy leaning on the on the bar. That famous clip from when he falls is when he goes crashing out. So, but look, I mean, there's been marked improvements. Okay, what's missing from this season, which I couldn't stand, is the insane ideological boring lecturing. Now that we do get a lot in the content, but the lecturing really has been cut down a lot. Jodie's been cut down a lot, apart from this 3rd episode. And they've had a lot. What he's doing right now is doing a lot of stuff that people who aren't fans, the normies, will look at and go, "Yeah, that looks like Doctor Who to me." But I don't like the woman one. I'll guess I'll wait till Russell T Davies comes back or whatever, right?
If a family member, for example, Simon, has left the television on while people are milling to and fro from the kitchen to wherever else in the home, and the television happens to be on, they may recognise, I used to like that show.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I do think the feeling is, if anybody's kind of passing through, they'll be kind of slightly mystified, by the first 2 episodes, let alone episode 3, in that, as you say, it kind of looks almost, but not quite like Doctor Who as they used to remember it. It doesn't quite resonate. It's sort of vaguely like something that they vaguely remember that they used to like, maybe, and none of this really reinforces people's love of Doctor Who. It doesn't remind them why they loved Doctor Who in the first place, I don't think, apart from Episode 2. I'm right, aren't I? I'm not losing the plot here. Episode 2 was War of the Sontarans, wasn't it? I'm not already going off on a complete tangent. So that one, as we've said previously, I still feel that was the most Doctor Who-like episode in a long, long, long time. And as we've been clear to say, that doesn't mean it's good. It doesn't mean it's the best.
No, but there were things in it that were,
it felt like the show was beginning to get vaguely back on track. Things that bugged me about that episode that we didn't really, when we did the review of episode 2, we didn't get a chance to talk about. But one thing that really still irritates me is the design of the new Sontarans means that the mouth, in the close-ups they do of the mouths are clearly visible of the actors inside the Sontaran mouths.
Yes. Okay, I have a theory about that, right?
Yeah, the Sontaran's lips aren't moving at all. You can just see the actors' lips inside moving. And they never used to do this on certainly in the first...
I knew there was something that wasn't quite right about those, because I did notice and I couldn't quite put my finger on what it was.
And that's what it is. And it's just really strange because, fair enough, I realise that this is a difficult thing to do, to get the actor's lips to actually move with the monster's lips. I get that. But as a result, you don't do massive close-ups that reveal that. It's it's a simple rule of direction. You pull your camera back a little bit so you can't see that. So I just think it's things like that still just rankle. You know, the 21st century with all the money it's got, can we still not get that right? Or
Simon, I think that was done on purpose, right? I think they actually did that on purpose. Yeah, I think they were trying to recreate the original Kevin Lindsay. Is it Kevin Lindsay? Was it the
yeah.
Where you could kind of see his mouth, but he go and move it. And I think they were just trying to Okay, I'll give you an example. Somebody wanted a coffin like a Star Trek shuttlecraft, right? And it's like, how do you get a coffin like a Star Trek shuttlecraft? Apparently, in the Philippines, I think there's some country where they make these novelty coffins. You can give them a picture of that. They make it. So somebody sent them a Christmas tree ornament of a Star Trek shuttle to make as a coffin, and they made a perfect replica, but they also made the hook on it as well, right? This giant hook on it. so I think that's what they were doing. I think they were trying to. They were like, oh look, sometimes you can kind of see their double mouth, or some stupid idea that didn't get flushed away.
It's really, and the other thing that is still bugging me about really bugging me about that War of the Sontarans is the use of the wok as a dangerous weapon, because I'm sure this must be against BBC guidelines, because BBC guidelines very clearly state, and Doctor Who's got into trouble about this in the past, you can't use household objects for violence because it might encourage children to take up the idea. So I'm sure that back in the day, that really would have been highly questioned. Philip Hinchcliffe or his ilk would have got into real trouble over using a wok as a violent weapon and showing it being used very clearly, showing several times how you hit somebody over the back of the head with a wok. And I'm surprised that none of the critics or anything have pulled the BBC up on this, because it just seems really, really questionable to me. And make it comedy as well. We're back to sort of the tango ads of the 90s, where you've been tangoed. You know, let's make a comedy out of hitting somebody over the back of the head with a wok. Just seems a bit dubious to me. There we go.
I think it's really hit on something
to me with the first episode, and it's like the second, and not the third one, but the first couple. That this seemed to be kind of like a continuation of the feeling that you got from season 24. I mean, I'm sure you got the season 24 Blu-ray, right? And so I haven't revisited that for a while, and I liked it a lot more than I could see where they were going and what they were trying to do with it. And it was frothy and silly in a lot of ways. I can see that it seemed to be a kind of like trying to continue the feel of that. If I'm trying to be charitable.
Yeah, I think you could be right, but this is where, when we reviewed War of the Sontarans, I spoke about this, that I strongly feel there's a real dichotomy, there's a schizophrenia at the heart of this whole Flux thing, because you're right. On the one hand, they're trying to be season 24 frothy and light with comedy aliens and comedy woks. But then on the other hand, we're talking about the most cataclysmic event in the entire history of the universe ever. And the two are just not comfortable bedfellows.
But is it? We've seen. Okay, here's another bit of Chibnall useless writing, right? We have the Flux. We see it eating planets, right? And then the next time we see it, it's just mangled a bunch of buildings. Like, what does it do? Like, how do a bunch of spaceships fall with impenetrable chill?
No, you're right.
Like, for God's sake, it's so stupid.
Every time we're about to see some serious impact, from it, they cut away to something else. Every time they give us a decent cliffhanger, there have been three really quite strong cliffhangers so far this season, and certainly the first two have just cut away pretty much to something else. But as you can probably gather, everybody, that given these two observations from the gentleman already, we're in for a colourful show with a slightly left of field look. I can't wait to get into it. But before we do, if you'd like to do some real-time traveling of your own, each and every edition of this show, past, present, and future, is just a tap or two away on the device of your choice if you know where to look. There's dozens of great conversations, reviews, previews, geek outs, and deep dives with all our regular panelists. We know there's something for every fan at type40.podbean.com. There'll be more about that a little later on, as well as a connecting call to the matrix of all knowledge that we know as the Fandom Podcast Network for a word about all the other coverage of geeky pop culture and classic entertainment that goes on all the other shows over there. Okay, so I think we're as ready as we'll ever be, gentlemen, to go and get fluxed, get yourself comfortable, and enjoy the ride. Yeah, we're looking back at the third episode of Series 13 called Once Upon Time. It's another memorable title from Chris Chibnall that's not going to get confused with any other episode at all, I suppose, maybe. Whatever. Yes, the general gist of it was that time is beginning to run wild, and on a planet that shouldn't exist in the aftermath of an apocalypse, the Doctor, Dan, Yaz, and Vinda, whoever he is, face a battle to survive. Yes, this is Once Upon Time, originally aired on the 14th of November, 2021. It starred Jodie Whittaker, who they keep insisting is playing the Doctor, alongside Yasmin Khan, played by Mandip Gill, Dan Lewis, played by John Bishop, and Jacob Anderson as Vinda. The director is completely new to the series, as her Salim directed this one, the third one. He's back to direct episodes 4 and 5 as well. So he's done that sort of second block, and it's executive produced by Matt Stevens and Chris Chibnall again. So when we last saw the cast, we'd been served this cliffhanger, which again, I thought was reasonably good. I mean, providing that one has any connection with Yaz whatsoever. And
I was screaming for her for time to rip her apart in front of me. I was like, yes!
Well, we all were.
Yes! So it didn't really work for me.
The problem is that she's just as stiff and expressionless as she always is. She's just daubed in these weird glyphs, isn't she, Simon?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, we did talk about this, and I hailed this as, this is a typical, a classic Doctor Who cliffhanger. If, as you say, you are invested in Yaz as a character, it's a typical Doctor Who cliffhanger. And as I also predicted, they would bail out and they wouldn't actually come up with any reasonable explanation for the cliffhanger. They just choose to ignore it. And that's exactly what they did. And what makes me really, really angry, and I know that Classic Who has done this in the past, where they basically re-edit the reprise of the episode to ensure that what was in the previous episodes physically, time-wise cannot happen, and that's exactly what they did. So fair enough. Yeah, Classic Who has done it. I'm not letting those cliffhangers off any more comfortably. No. But this one really, really, really rankled with me for the simple fact that at the end of episode 2, Swarm has promised that when he clicks his fingers, Yaz is dead. And we clearly see at the end of episode 2, we clearly see Swarm click his fingers. So Yaz is dead. But no, apparently not, because somehow, in a timey-wimey kind of way, the Doctor actually managed to do all that she managed to do unseen, invisibly, before Swarm actually clicked his fingers. But it still doesn't work, because the Doctor is very clearly seen at the end of episode 2 in the same shot as Swarm's clicking his fingers. The Doctor is there over his shoulder. So the resolution to episode 3 is flatly impossible to achieve. And I defy anybody, any defender of the Chibnall years, to explain to me how it is that episode 2 clearly ends with the Doctor and Swarm in shot, clicking fingers, and somehow it all gets rewritten at the beginning.
I can explain it. I can totally explain it to you.
Rabbi, he's banking on us not having paid attention, isn't he, or having forgot?
No, I can totally explain it to you. Okay, this is what I think is happening. Somebody is helping Chibnall, right? Like, you can see the bits that aren't him with the cliffhangers. I think Rusty Davis, Stephen Moffat, somebody, a friend of his, came up with the cliffhangers, because the cliffhangers aren't bad and the cold openings aren't bad. So, but it stands out so clear, and then he's got the pieces to pick up, and he does know what to do. So he's like, and they have like the resolution. Not only does the mistake that they use, but it also has something I think is a cardinal error for Doctor Who, in that you hear the Doctor's monologue, which or Jodie Whittaker's Doctor's monologue, whatever you want to call it, which is even when they did the new Adventures, that was it Peter Darville Evans, whatever
Evans.
He one of the writing guys says you never ever hear anything from the Doctor's point of view, because it demystifies the character. And the other thing is, God, this Doctor loves herself. I always work things out really quickly, me. Oh, I will. And then, okay, this is one of the this is the ground center of why this era is not just bad, but I think genuinely evil, right? Because she's talking about different things about what she does, because she's so freaking brilliant. That I have to work out, where's danger? Where's danger coming? Are my friends there? And then she says something which is so wrong. Says, who has the power? What does that matter?
Yes, I noticed that.
Yeah, what does it matter if a Dalek, if something is intrinsically evil, has less power than something that is good, right? I don't know. It's like the Brigadier has a Dalek gun and the Dalek doesn't have a Dalek gun. The Dalek's still evil and the Brigadier is still good.
And the thing
stand out.
The thing that's interesting, you're right with those observations, and the problem is, if you are going to have the Doctor have monologues, you've got to have a damn good actor to do it, and unfortunately Whittaker simply can't deliver those monologues convincingly. And the other problem is, you've got to, if you're going to come out with this kind of rubbish about how much power the Doctor holds and how she's so brilliant at all that she does, again, you've got to have an actor not only that's strong enough, but also has enough gravitas to convince with that. And unfortunately, because she's such a lightweight actress and the characterization is so lightweight, you don't believe for a microsecond that she actually has the kind of power that she's talking about. Tom Baker, yeah, I believe he's got that power, and he would be able to get away with the monologue. Jodie Whittaker, she has no power. She can't carry the monologues off. And as the episode went on, and she continued with these inner thoughts where she was saying, oh, got to get back there. Oh, got to do it. Was literally excruciating. It was like children's BBC level of acting. It was just so banal, so unbelievable. She has no gravitas. She can't do it.
The more she turns it up, the less believable that she gets. She seems like when she starts shouting, she seems like somebody, maybe she's on the car park to Morrison's and some single dad with a couple of kids has maybe nicked a parking space or something like that. That's
yes, that's that face. Yes, I've seen that face.
That's perfect. But that's her angry acting, you see, and she does it an awful lot. And whisper, and you can, again, going back to somebody like Tom Baker. When Tom Baker got angry, the screen trembled. When Jodie Whittaker gets angry, you just laugh.
I've long wanted to do a crowdfunding campaign where we can pay Jodie Whittaker to do the "Have I Got the Right" speech from Genesis of the Daleks. Nothing would be funnier than that.
When Jodie lurches into that sort of screaming and shouting and that sort of moral stance that she's trying to to take. Yeah. To me, it just makes me think back to being a child, and if my mother ever did that, it would guarantee that I would eat my tea even slower. It was that kind of thing. But in general, I mean, the plot itself and what you're saying about the character is absolutely right. And I think we've all spoken about this. I've certainly spoken to you both independently about this, about the way that specifically Jodie, but maybe Chibnall himself too, see the character as this cartoon children's character, this magical imp type person, and the stakes and the way you've just described that cliffhanger, it was very, very Danger Mouse somehow. As in the blink of an eye, she does it, because it says in the plot that the Doctor jumps into the Temple's time storm and stalls Swarm. This is all in about 2 seconds of screen time. Stalls Storm by hiding Dan, Yaz, and Vinda, who by this point she's no idea who that is, in their own pasts.
They actually reference that. And the lad who I don't know who he is yet. He's Captain Jack! He's Captain Jack, you cancel! That's who he is.
That's why we know that this was originally written for Captain Jack.
Exactly.
Because those lines have been dropped in afterwards, because if it was still Jack, then she wouldn't have to explain or issue that disclaimer that, well, I don't know who that lad is, but I'm going to help save him anyway. It would just be Jack, and we would know the bond between her and Jack is just as strong as the bond between her and Yaz.
There would have been stakes.
And the problem is, again, directorially, it's appallingly constructed. That whole sequence where she supposedly, in the blink of a microscopic eye, she manages to achieve all this. It's terribly constructed editorially, very poorly edited, because I hadn't got a clue what was actually happening. She sort of jumps forward. I think she grabs Dan, and you see his feet sort of lifting off the ground, but you don't know where he's going. She doesn't do it with all characters. What is happening? And so you're blindsided before you even begin to get to this explanation way down in the episode that she's hidden them in their time streams. So the general public is just sitting there thinking, What just happened? So
I had no idea.
The
physical editing construction of that sequence is so poorly executed that you're telling that Chibnall is trying to tell a really complicated concept with this, and so you've got to be damn sure of your direction and your editing to ensure that the public don't get lost.
Because it's being broadcast to potentially the most populist audience,
correct,
in prime time on the major TV station in the UK.
Yeah, and so you can't have it that ambiguous. And as I say, this is putting aside the fact that it completely obliterates the actual ending from episode 2, when you clearly see the Doctor in the same frame as Swarm, clicking his fingers. So Yaz is dead. So it's impossible for episode 3 to happen. Simple as that.
So we see that Yaz is in her police car, actually on duty on one of the 2 days that she actually was on duty in that role. So she's in the police car.
She must be the least good, the most appalling police officer that there's ever been. She's hopeless as a police officer.
She was the bestest ever. That's in canon. Don't you remember? You didn't see it. Maybe you did see it. Beginning of season, was it 12? The old white man policeman says, "Oh, Yaz, you're the bestest one." And the only reason I say the skin color because that's the only thing that matters to the
absolutely. But she's atrocious as a police officer. She's got to be the least convincing person as a police officer.
Although, however bad she is as a police officer, she is so much better as a police officer than as an actor. Which was demonstrated so well this episode when they took on other people's roles. And does she not have the ability to do that.
Had how many versions of Yaz in this episode? 4 or 5? And all of them as awful as the rest. When she popped up in Vinder's past as his superior officer in the high-collared tunic with all the buttons on it, trying to sound all superior and commanding officer-like, it was ridiculous. It was laughable. Yeah. Mandip Gill has no range. She's been really exposed by this 3rd season of Chibnall material because she isn't fighting for screen time with 2 other companions. There's much more time to see her limits. And I've always said that as an actress, she was pretty hungry to do some work and proud to be on the show. But just like Jodie Whittaker, the fact that she didn't have to audition, she is no good in this role. She hasn't got the range. She's not capable of bringing anything to the character of Yaz whatsoever, any personality at all. And, okay, the material doesn't help. But in those moments, it was nothing short of hilarious. And to see Jacob Anderson, bless his heart, who is a decent actor, and he's doing his level best here with material that's just as thin and a character just as uninteresting, you can see him looking for something from her. You can see it in his eyes in those scenes and getting nothing back. The poor bugger.
She's just completely out of her depth, isn't she? It's as simple as that. She's way out of her depth, and unfortunately, so is Jodie. And in my opinion, also John Bishop is as well. So we're looking at a really weak.
Yeah, but John Bishop you can forgive because at least he looks okay in that picture. By the way, but now you pulled this picture up. There's something else I really wanted to touch on. So Chibnall said we're destroying the history of Doctor Who and getting rid of canon and doing all that so we can open this up to a broader, more interesting news story. Yeah, right? More
exciting, unseen, romantic.
So we got a glimpse of what that vision art was, and it's garbage tier, boring 2021, forgettable sci-fi. It's it was absolute, like, yeah, of course, you have the stunning and brave, and I'm usually only saying the skin color because that's the only thing these idiots, they care about, right? They have a stunning and brave black woman who is masculine and snarling with a gun, blowing things up and stomping around. Like, it's like every other awful show to, like, really, I mean, and shows that will be forgotten in, like, forever. This is a 60-year legacy.
You do some channel hopping between TV stations like the Sci-Fi Channel and all those sort of, as you say, lower tier channels on TV, and you will come across dozens of sci-fi shows that look exactly like this pocket world, this past, this that Chris Chibnall is offering us. That this was worth destroying the Doctor Who lore for a bunch of people dressed in really unconvincing combat gear, holding rifles that don't look like they've got any weight to them, wearing snoods, stumbling around any sort of generic desert wasteland environment, as you say, Rabbi, kicking indoors and giving it loads of attitude. It is so that he's taken something that was unlike anything else on British TV and turned it into something that is like everything else in genre TV, and it's unforgivable, unimaginative, and because he's got no story. There's still no story there underneath it. It's all about identity. It's, as you say, Rabbi, you're right to mention these things, these immutable physical characteristics, because Chibnall is clearly obsessed with them. I know you do. I can hear it in your voice. I know you do. But
did you grow up being taught that to judge people? Did they even talk about someone's skin color, ethnicity, as like it's irrelevant in any way? It's just wrong. It's been bred into me my entire life. It's just, I don't understand where the world is now. It's just so, we got, like, the anti-racists have brought back segregationism and racism. Okay, it's a weird choice. It's a weird choice.
The thing that frustrates me with this whole episode, and this is undoubtedly the most angry I've felt after any episode of Doctor Who ever. And I even watched Orphan 55, and I watched Arachnids in the UK. I watched those episodes, and this made me the most angry of any Doctor Who episode ever, because it's the worst episode in 58 years for just basically being 50 minutes of padding. It did nothing. It went nowhere. It was treading water for 50 minutes. It was the greats, people like Terence Dix, Barry Letts, Philip Hinchcliffe, always used to talk about the problem with episode 3 of a 4-parter or episode 5 of a 6-parter, because it was always the episode that they feared they'd be treading water. And this is just all of that condensed down into one 50-minute episode. It did nothing. It went nowhere for 50 minutes. It merely presented us with no story at all, just padding. And that's what has made me really, really angry about this, because everything in that 50 minutes should have been in around about 50 seconds and would have been the pre-title stinger before the titles, and then we go into, after the titles, we actually go into an episode proper. But instead, he used an entire 50 minutes to basically tell the resolve of the cliffhanger from episode 2, and it went nowhere. And the problem I have with this is, for a start, he's only got 6 episodes this year, so we're seriously going to waste an entire episode with utter rubbish that goes nowhere. And what I think Chibnall has misunderstood is, if we look at the closest comparison I can find to this episode is one of the best episodes, I think, in the entire run of 58 years of Doctor Who, which is The Deadly Assassin Part 3. Now, that one is 25 minutes of treading water. Does nothing, goes nowhere. Yeah. It needs nothing. It's nothing to do with the story. It doesn't matter. And it's brilliant. It's one of the best 25 minutes on TV I've ever seen. Exactly. I would argue it is possibly the best 25-minute episode, well, the best episode of Doctor Who ever in its entirety, in its one single run. Because what it has got that this episode didn't have is it's got some momentum. It's got a story. It's got a beginning, middle, and end. It has a reason for happening.
The stakes are very clear, aren't they, Simon? And who we're supposed to be rooting for, believing in, is very, very clear.
Yes, absolutely. And the thing is, it presents in 25 minutes, The Deadly Assassin Part 3 presents just 25 minutes of completely nonsensical stuff. None of it makes any sense. It doesn't hang together. You've got weird characters popping in. You've got a samurai. You've got a clown in the ground. None of it, but it doesn't matter that it doesn't make sense. And what Chibnall has done in this one is he's done exactly the same thing. He's got 50 minutes of completely inconsequential stuff, none of which actually links together, in the same way that it doesn't in The Deadly Assassin. But The Deadly Assassin does it with such conviction. It does it so brilliantly. You care about these characters. There is a through route. You can see that there is some sort of...
It's powered by Tom Baker in the same way that Heaven Sent is powered by Peter Capaldi.
Well, you know, the one thing with The Deadly Assassin episode 3 is it was so cutting edge and forward looking, right? It was the Matrix 20, 30 years before it happened, right? It's cyber. Nobody is doing that in the mid 70s. This is backward looking. This is just like retread after read. I mean, I think I'm not sure if I said it. I'm not sure when I said it. If I said it before we started recording or now, but it seemed to be somewhat ripping off Big Finish's, I would say, failure called was it Zagreus? Yeah,
it's the 40th anniversary story from them, wasn't it? Big epic that they put together.
Right. And listen, I like their ambition and I like what but it didn't really work. So he's ripping off something badly, and it's just so backward looking. That comparison, Deadly Assassin, is brilliant.
I think he is. I think he was actually thinking of The Deadly Assassin as well, because I think he'd watched that and he thought, yeah, we can throw loads of disparate stuff together that doesn't make any sense. It's all weird and it's non-consequential and nobody's going to have a clue what's going on, but actually it's going to be a brilliant story. And he completely misunderstood of what made The Deadly Assassin so brilliant. And that was, firstly, you cared about the characters. Secondly, you could see that everything, although these weird events of clowns and surgeons with massive hypodermic needles and samurais, they all had a consequence, and the Doctor was beginning to suffer. And instead, all he did was just throw all this weird stuff together that was all supposed to be really intriguing and make people look at it and think, wow, what's going on? And it didn't. It just bored the pants off everybody. And seriously,
well, Simon, he makes the same mistake time after time after time. He assumes that we care. First, that we even know who they are, that we relate to them and care about people like Yasmin Khan, Dan Bishop, and Vinda, who all of us have spent like 3 minutes in the company of.
Exactly.
Puts them into these situations. Yeah, there's just nothing to see. He also seems to be, as well, fixated on the idea that we are largely invested in the concept of the Fugitive Doctor as played by Jo Martin. So I'm really interested by the idea that when the Doctor is sent back into her own timeline, of all that, I mean, we don't know how long the Doctor has lived for, how many faces he has had, how many lifetimes they have
13.
led.
It's 13. Okay, to let you know now.
In Chibnall's world, it's been millennia after millennia and potentially thousands of faces.
Millions.
What a coincidence that it ends up being that this body is the one that she ends up getting sent back through in the timeline to. That it's this face that's staring at her, sort of Sam Beckett
like, wasn't it intentional? Didn't Swarm? I was going to say Storm. No, Swarm. Wasn't it? Then he said again in the really generic bad moustache twirling end of it. Those are my plan all along to send you back into your history. Now I'm gonna go. It's like, instead of killing you, which I clearly can, okay, I can kill all of you in a second because I got complete power. I can do that. No, I'm just gonna go now for a bit after I've given you a bit of exposition.
I think by the time, if he did say that, I think by the time he was spouting off that kind of, and bear in mind, I still really like Swarm and the guy who's playing him. I think he's doing a brilliant job.
Yeah.
By the time that may have happened, if that was said, I was well out of it, and I'm prepared to accept that. Has anybody rewatched this episode?
No, you are kidding, aren't you? I began to get angry about 6 or 7 minutes in, maybe about 10 minutes in, as the penny dropped. And I suddenly realised, oh my life, we've got 50 minutes. This entire episode, it's clear, is going to be given over to this weird dreamscape kind of world that Chibnall thinks he's created, where nothing is going to make sense. I suddenly realised what I got to look forward to for the next 30, 40 minutes. And that was when I began to get angry. I thought, you can't do this. And I could feel the general public just switching off in droves.
I know.
I don't know what's going on.
How much do you think it's going to hurt this episode in the viewing?
I honestly think it will hurt them a lot. I think episode 4 will fall off a cliff. I'll prophesy it now. I think episode 4 figures will fall off a cliff.
Yeah, I'm predicting a minimum 500,000 drop.
At least, because the public will desert it in droves. They don't care. I didn't care. None of us cared. The public certainly don't care. It was just the worst. It was interesting because the independent review, which was very, very damning, called it exactly what I feel, which was a pointless mess and a waste of an episode. Those are the two things that they clearly said about it, and they were absolutely spot on. This, as you say, Dan, this was prime time BBC One television on a Sunday night, and we're literally telling fan fiction. This was purely fan fiction. It was the kind of thing that somebody would have written in a fanzine in the 1980s. That's what it was.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it felt like they would be doing something daring if they did this in the let's say in the 90s. Like it feels like audio visuals, the precursor to Big Finish. It felt like that before they grew up. they were professional.
But again, I mean, interestingly, it also feels a lot like episodes 13 and 14 of The Trial of a Time Lord. Now, question that did not work anywhere near as well as episode 3 of the Deadly Assassin. They were trying to do the same kind of thing. So again, there was a lot of weird stuff. None of it made any sense. It didn't kind of link together. But again, it still had a through route. And as I say, the success of it is debatable, of Trial of a Time Lord parts 13 and 14. But even although it wasn't as successful as part 3 of The Deadly Assassin, it still at least has a through route. You can see where they're going with it. Although there's weird stuff that doesn't quite, it's a dream landscape. It has some sort of internal sense to it that this story Chibnall didn't even try to give it any sort of internal logic or any internal sense. It was just an excuse to have 50 minutes of weird stuff, none of which made sense. And
I would disagree. I think it had internal logic and sense. I just think it was very boring. Like, I can tell you the story. The story, once you get past all like the way they do it, the story is pretty dull. Right?
Yeah, I understood it. I've heard a lot of people saying, "Oh, this is nobody understood this. It's impenetrable and it's really, really confusing." It is confusing, but I did understand it, and I think everything that you need is there to understand it. But the problem is why it's close to impenetrable is because you have really got to want to understand it and to be patient. Not necessarily with it, because there's nothing particularly enigmatic about it. It's just really quite badly made, and there are no emotional anchors for you to sort of.
And so maybe that's the problem for me personally, because I didn't. Well, I kind of vaguely understood it in a weird Doctor Who-y, timey-wimey kind of way. I kind of could see what it was sort of saying, but maybe you're right, Dan, in that I had lost the will to try to understand it because I just got so angry that I could see he was going to do this for an entire 50 minutes, and he clearly wasn't going to explain really the cliffhanger to episode 2.
Something else as well, Simon. Something else that we get with Jim, we've had this certainly since It Takes You Away, and maybe even before. It's passing off the absurd as the profound.
Yes, that's brilliant.
That's really so right. Yes, that's such an accurate way of saying it. Yes, it really is.
That's how he wrong foots people. So you've got people out there who are receiving it. I always say this: there are 5 or 6 people on Twitter who really love this series, and episodes like this. They play to that side to them where they sit there on a Sunday going, "Oh yeah, I'm finding this really stimulating," and all that, because they're being sort of how can I put this? They feel they're being vindicated by something that it is really profound, but they're just falling for it. It's the Emperor's new clothes. There is it is just
stupid people feel intelligent, right?
Exactly.
That's bottom line. It makes stupid people feel intelligent.
While if anybody else watching or listening,
like it. I'm sorry.
And again, this is where
I don't say that. I don't say that to offend anybody who is listening or watching. I do get it, but this is how I receive it. That's what I notice about this story, about Chris Chibnall's own playbook, not just as a writer, but as the showrunner of a mainstream sci-fi TV show.
But the problem is, however much you and you're spot on there, Dan, absolutely spot on. But however much you boys might argue that there is a kind of internal logic, and you get the story and you see where they're going with it. Okay, that's fine, but that's still I still claim that all of that could have been told in a couple of minutes as the pre-title.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because
it's got no weight to it. It's got no worth.
No. And so basically all he does is he spends 50 minutes with this thin story of this kind of explanation of how we get out of the cliffhanger from episode 2. And so all we do is we spend 50 minutes getting from A to B, but we go via C, D, E, F, G, H, all the way through just to get there by throwing in these, as you say, Dan, these abstract, these absurd concepts, none of which are interesting. And that's the difference again to me with something like The Deadly Assassin Part 3. Everything that happens in Deadly Assassin Part 3 is interesting, engaging, exciting, and you want to see what happens. The weird, abstract, absurd stuff that happens in this episode is just boring. It's dull. I don't care about any of it.
And you think how little story there was also in Chapter 1? There was hardly any story to that at all.
Absolutely.
So that's the effect. We've got 6 episodes, and 2 of them are next to completely story-free.
This episode had, I think, from Chibnall's point of view, I think for him it has vital plot points in it. Like he introduces Belle, who looks like is going to be the mother of the timeless child to me. Like when you do a pregnant reveal and it's all about a child. Oh, that's about, and then Vinder's the father, so Captain Jack. So Belle and Captain Jack are probably the parents of the Doctor or the timeless child or whatever nonsense you want to call it. But so that's the important thing. You got a little bit of backstory that Zazur and Swarm with the Doctor who knows more, and you got Vinder's backstory, right? So for him, it had some real important plot points in it. But it was just nonsense putting it all together. And these Daleks look wrong. I don't know what it is. These Daleks look wrong.
I can tell you exactly. Go on, you go, Simon.
You go for it, Dan, because I'm sure you and I both agree on it.
I think the reason why they look off is simply because they're the very first sort of completely CGI Daleks that we've had.
Yes. That's exactly it. They're CGI Daleks, and they looked so CGI. They looked so obviously CGI. It was so obvious that they got this scene that they kind of said, "Oh, there's clearly no point us trundling 3 Daleks out there. So it's going to cost too much to put 3 take-throughs for a couple of shots. So yeah, let's CGI them in. Oh, I tell you what,
put some smoke over the top and blur them a little, as if because they're moving. Put some smoke around so people may not notice that it's a real half-assed job."
Yeah, and also, because we're going to CGI them in, you know what we can do? We can have them float as well. So that's brilliant. We've got a double whammy, and it's just no, because Daleks don't generally trundle around floating unless they've got a reason to do it. So there's no logic to make them float other than the fact that you're not taking the props out. You're going to do the CGI, and so you can make them float if you want to. So everything about them looks wrong. You're right, Svi.
You think of the fan artists out there, Rabbi, who we know can create Daleks and put them into environments like this, probably in an afternoon, and make them look better.
Lee Sullivan could have done it better.
Well, and also, I mean, when you look at them in that shot that we look in that area, if you are going to CGI Daleks in, you might as well make them look interesting and good. But again, it's poor direction. We're going to CGI 3 Daleks in. Oh, just stick them in a line and just have them wander through the back of a shot. Why would you do that? If you're going to CGI them in, at least make them look interesting rather than as they look in that shot, which is just boring. Again, everything about this episode was
the direction of this episode was markedly weaker than the other guys. It's his first job. I mean, it's the guy's first job.
But you don't give it to him.
Yeah, no, they picked him because he's not a white male, right? That's the only thing they care about, right? He's not a white male, and so
it's what some people would tag as a diversity hire. I think that's becoming. I mean, we've only seen 1 of his 3 installments. He may rally. Maybe this was just a bad afternoon for him. I don't know. Bad day at work.
Well, I do wonder, Dan, if we should cut him some slack, simply because can you imagine, as a first-time director on Doctor Who, you get that script to work with? I mean, his heart must have sunk. I would have imagined he would have killed for War of the Sontarans instead of this pile of rubbish. I still wonder what they all must have made of this episode when the script landed on there and they started to read through. They either panicked, or I seriously think what probably happened when they did the read-through and when they were first reading, I think they probably all just giggled like school kids because they were just in this scene the Doctor's the police officer. Oh, in this one, Yaz is Vinder's superior. Oh, in this one, and it's just they would have just killed themselves laughing.
I don't think they understand it generally. So they're not understanding something. It doesn't really. They don't understand something when it's supposed to be understandable. So there's like, business normal. By the way, you were saying that things being unintelligent, not making sense. The thing that was unintelligible and didn't make sense was what they call it again, the moray, like that we've never heard of before. And you had a picture of them up just now.
That's these creatures. This scene reminded me of a scene. In fact, a lot of the episode did. Of a scene from the old 1970s show Monkey, just without all the fun of watching people.
Don't discuss Monkey. I like Monkey.
Without all the fun of watching people getting twatted in the head with big staffs.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Dan, because literally that picture that we're looking at now, we saw so many shots like this of the Doctor floating in front of these gods, and it's almost like, again, it's poor direction, because it's almost like the director just wanted to make Jodie Whittaker look even more stupid than she looks anyway. We're just going to hang her there with her arms hanging and her feet going, and it just makes her look completely and utterly ridiculous, and again undermines the character. It's not a good approach to take. If you're going to shoot, you've got to shoot something like that very confidently and carefully.
But the thing that really annoys me is they are introduced as like a weird, mysterious thing. We don't know what they are, and now suddenly the Doctor knows who they are, what's going on, and like they got it knows about the planet Time. I mean, my God, what a terrible name! I'm going to call it the planet Time, and then time and space are at war with each other. And like, there's so much that stuff is utter bollocks, if you want to use a technical term. It's like, it just makes no sense whatsoever. And I don't think it's ever going to make any sense. But
it may sound halfway cool in a really sort of sub-genre kind of way. But if you're going to try and sort of delve into that in any way and flesh it out in any way, you're going to be on a hide into nothing. You cannot sell a concept like that.
No, and that's why you need a really good director to carry it off, a really good, experienced director to carry it off. And the truth of it is, and again, just looking at that picture of the Doctor floating in front of the Maori or whatever they're called, it's very John Ridgway comic strip from the 1980s. It's the kind of thing that the Doctor Who magazine would have done in the 1980s with this weird dreamscape, this weird landscape. And that's fine. Within a Doctor Who comic strip environment for fans reading the magazine, you look at something like The Stars Fell on Stockbridge and what was The Tides of Time. All of those were really impenetrable. They were difficult to understand. But it's okay, because firstly, you're talking to fans, and so that's okay. And secondly, you're making a virtue out of it because you're just making these great pieces of John Ridgway art. And so that's one thing to do. But you can't do it, I feel strongly, with a license fee paying public who are paying to have this episode made and put on prime time terrestrial television between Countryfile and Strictly Come Dancing. It doesn't work. You can't. Well,
let's talk a little bit about the cast of this, because you mentioned earlier on about the cast of Once Upon a Time. We've got several new characters that are introduced. We've got Craig Parkinson from Line of Duty, who plays somebody called the Grand Serpent.
Totally wasted. Totally wasted.
He seemed like he wanted to be somewhere else the entire. I couldn't register who. Well, he looked disinterested. Jacob Anderson looked disinterested and disconnected from the material. So I don't think any of it particularly sank in with me. I hear that Craig, what's his name again? Craig Parkinson, I hear, is a great actor in other shows. You would never have known it for this.
Can I just check, Dan? Is this the guy who was Vinder's boss, who was the baddie with the grey streak in the hair? Is that who we're talking about?
Yeah, or whatever.
That's right.
He
was sat there clasping his hands for most of the episode. No idea what all that was
about. The evil.
Well, again. The problem with this character, again, is that he just appears, and we're supposed to know immediately. We're supposed to have a response immediately to a character we've never met before, and we're supposed to feel some sort of investment in this character as to we either hate them or like them. Or I don't know. I've never met this character. I don't care, because we've already been pretty much proven that the whole episode is just sort of this kind of weird dreamscape thing that doesn't actually mean anything anyway. Why am I going to feel invested in a character like that? Either way, doesn't matter. None of it matters.
In Chibnall's mind, I think it's because it's Craig Parkinson, and Craig Parkinson's a in-demand actor, so we're all going to be
people excited. Just like with John Bishop, people will recognise him, and therefore they'll be invested in that, because if he's playing a similar sort of slimy character, or whatever it is.
What is he in then, Dan? I've never heard of him before.
He was in Line of Duty for one season. He was in Misfits for like 4 episodes. He's been around, like he's a reasonably recognised. But in general, Chibnall's his approach to marketing as well is that he believes, and I think he does believe it, that Doctor Who under his reign is as popular as it was under David Tennant at its absolute height.
Oh, do you honestly think
he really believes that? That's his approach he's taking. He's like, it makes sense. This whole thing makes sense if we're all like sitting on the edge of our seat. We can't wait to find out.
I believe a version of that. I believe that he thought that all he really needed to do once he cast a woman in the role was to just keep this show on screen, delivered at the agreed times, the set amount that they'd come to between themselves. He just got to keep the wheels turning.
And he couldn't even do that.
And he couldn't even do that. We're also introduced to the actress Thadia Graham, who plays Belle. You mentioned her earlier on, Rabbi, and yeah,
she was good. She was good. Nice
actress.
She won me over on her Instagram post or a Twitter post, where she was just like very genuinely grateful. She was grateful and felt honoured.
Exactly. It's the same situation as Jacob Anderson. Here we have somebody who is clearly a nice person, clearly relishes the idea of being in the show, somebody who clearly has natural talent, latching onto this character only to be served with very, very thin material. So what they're doing is they're bringing everything they can, pouring their own personal energy onto the screen. Sadly, I suspect this is not going to be enough either. But it's exactly the same story. And I've heard these rumours out there too that Belle and Vinda are going to end up being the Doctor's parents. But I've also heard the same thing about the Swarm character as well, that he's the Doctor's father. So when did Doctor Who, this wonderful old show with that beautiful sort of soft focused origin or mythology that sort of stretched back, that was so murky that you could only, so much of it was obscured, it left so much to the imagination. We're 18 months later, we've already had one crappy origin. Now we've potentially got another. And from what I hear, we may even have another one coming before the end of the run.
And again, it's really, really interesting because, again, to go back to, I know we keep coming back to this, but go back to the Deadly Assassin again. That's interesting because the Deadly Assassin also touches on kind of origins of the Doctor. We learn little tantalising glimpses. We see more of Time Lord society than we've ever seen before. And so, but what that does, Dan, is that feeds into the Deadly Assassin, feeds specifically into what you're talking about there. It is tantalising. It's just this murky past that we're kind of almost seeing enough to be told what's happening, but not so much that it spoils the fun. And so it's kind of
in your mind.
Yeah, it's almost you've got your hand on the curtain, but you're not drawing the curtain back. Whereas somehow with this, we're supposedly drawing the curtain back with Once Upon a Time, as well as with the Timeless Children, and we're supposed to be so invested in it. We're supposed to be so in love with this idea, that they've come up with, that basically what Chibnall is saying with this, with the Timeless Child, and with these rumours that we're hearing about, if they turn out to be true, either way, it doesn't really matter. He's still talking about origin stuff. And what he's claiming is that what he can come up with out of his fevered mind is far more interesting and exciting than what we were able to come up with the few tantalising glimpses that we used to get fed throughout the original sort of 50-odd years of the show. And he genuinely thinks that his idea of the Timeless Child, that the Doctor is not a Time Lord after all that stuff, is more interesting than anything that any of the last 50 years of Doctor Who could tell us.
Or that anybody who may come afterwards may think of too. You know, he seems to view himself as the man to take on this job at this particular time and give us answers to questions that we never wanted.
Definitive answers.
Generations of talented people have held back from.
I was going to say you would have thought that reality just would you can't deny it. Like you know the metrics, you've seen the ratings. You say, and this whole thing of TV is going down and ratings are falling in general. Yes, because TV in general was garbage, right? Do you remember a few years ago when you said, if you keep doing all this insane ideology, putting in everything, people are just going to switch off? And that's exactly what happened. Over half the country has switched off. Not just Doctor Who, everything. YouTube's doing great. You know, Netflix is okay, but YouTube's doing great, and new media's doing great. But this stuff is why? Because it's just full of this, frankly, bonkers ideology, which is equally detached from reality in every way.
And it's interesting because I mean, last week when we reviewed episode 2, War of the Sontarans, we were all saying some favourable things about it. We were finding decent stuff to say about it. I really did feel that I could not. Nobody has been more vocal against Chris Chibnall than me, or indeed any of us here on the panel now. And I genuinely thought I cannot review War of the Sontarans. I would be doing it a disservice if I reviewed it how I've reviewed most other Chris Chibnall episodes, which is it's terrible, because it wasn't terrible. It had promise, it had interesting things. And so I genuinely thought, no, you're going to have to be generous with this, and you've got to say where things work. And there was lots in War of the Sontarans that did work. Lots that didn't, but lots that did. So let's praise that for a minute. But with this episode, as is clear now after an hour of talking about this, we're struggling to find anything positive to say at all about it. And I find it so frustrating that Chris Chibnall has followed probably the best Doctor Who episode in a long time with the worst episode in 58 years. And I'm like, how can you do that just as you're beginning to get an inkling that you might be onto something here, and finally you're writing decent, half-decent Doctor Who, and
something
we'll
that's
just
recognisable. Well, it was something that was recognisable as the same show. The visual signatures were there, and it made you feel a certain amount of engagement with it on a similar level, enough to fool you into thinking that things may have turned a corner.
Yeah.
But I'm interested by the fact that he couldn't sustain that for a single week. But I'm also interested by the character of the Fugitive Doctor. She's now listed as a Fugitive Doctor on the end credits. Never before. This is something I think that has sort of come from the fan base, the tag of the Fugitive Doctor. But here we have, obviously it's played by Joe Martin, originally appeared in that Fugitive of the Jadoon episode from series 12, and then again briefly in The Timeless Children. And this character again, I think, has gone in record time, gone from a character that made an impact, whether you like her or not, whether you like the idea or not, a character that did make some sort of minor cultural impact, to already looking like a tired idea and an actress
very quickly.
And an actress who's turning up just to say her lines out of some sort of obligation. She doesn't seem in sync with the character, doesn't seem interested, and all of this falls flat as well. And it seems like old hat right away.
You almost wonder whether Joe Martin's already regretting actually taking the part in Fugitive of the Jadoon, because she's kind of saddled with it now.
I mean, that
She seems
expression
to
seems to
love
say that
being
she is, isn't it? I mean, it's not...
She seems to love being associated with the show. You know, we've got this picture as well. She put out some pictures on social media, her own social media, where she's grinning like a Cheshire cat. And she's always very engaged with the fans. I think she's actually been to a couple of events now since the pandemic and the guidelines and the restrictions have sort of lifted. So she is mixing with fans, both in the real world and online, and seems very, very grateful for it. But on screen, she's been given no greater material than anybody else.
You know, the problem I have with her Doctor, also with Jodie, is that if I saw her out of context, I would have no idea it's supposed to be Doctor Who.
No. And that's
if I saw every other Doctor, Peter
right.
Davison maybe the least, because he had the most designed outfit. But I saw just about every other actor play Doctor Who. I guess yes, obviously they're Doctor Who, right? You know at an instant that this just doesn't exude it in any way, shape, or form.
You're right, and the problem is for the general public, again, watching this, they're not going to remember what happened in Fugitive of the Jadoon. They're not going to have a clue. What would have made absolute sense if Chibnall insisted on going down this whole route, which just irritates the life out of me anyway. And again, it's like you've said already, Dan. We get this Fugitive Doctor plonked in as though we're going to be wildly excited. Oh my God, the Fugitive Doctor is back. Nobody actually gives a damn. But if you were insisting on going down this route as a writer, you would have brought back somebody like Tennant or Matt Smith, because firstly the public would have got it and they would have understood, okay, yeah, the Doctor is seeing a former self, and secondly they would have been interested and engaged and excited. But I'm sorry, nobody's going to be desperately excited by seeing Joe Martin back.
Because she spent a total of say 10 minutes at the very, very most on screen.
Exactly.
The best part 2 years ago to an ever-dwindling audience because she doesn't look like the Doctor. And certainly in the last couple of appearances, she's not acted remotely like the Doctor. This is not connecting. I've said before that I felt Jo Martin stood a much greater chance of reaching this character than Jodie Whittaker, but she's not being given any good material now either. So the character is unrecognisable. No, I agree with you completely. And so all this does really, it harms the story, and I use that term very loosely, the story that Chris Chibnall is trying to sell us on. There's also been a video this week as well, because, as you said, The Independent reviewed this very, very badly. Even the Radio Times gave this a bad review, which was one paragraph of pretty much whoever wrote it throwing their hands in the air and saying, pretty much saying we may as well give up now. But such was the reception to this online too, not just in Doctor Who forums like Gallifrey Base, but over on Twitter and Facebook, people just condemning this and saying it was a waste of 48 minutes of their lives.
Yes.
The very next morning, over on Twitter, John Bishop chose to contact the Doctor Who community and send them a message about the confusing episode. So have a listen to this quick message from John Bishop himself.
Just a message to all the Doctor Who fans to say thanks for the feedback about Dan. It's brilliant to be part of it. That's my dog, by the way. That's not Carvinista. It's brilliant to be part of it. Dan as a character seems to have gone down really well. I know the plot's all over the place and there's so many different timelines, but it all pulls together. So keep on enjoying the Flux and keep on enjoying the series. And from my point of view, thanks for the feedback, because being part of Doctor Who is like a dream come true. Thanks a lot. Enjoy your Monday.
See, I just like it with that. I mean, I feel so good. I mean, he makes me feel good about him being in the show, and then he's in the show, and it's just awful.
He's terrible in the show. He can't act. That's the problem. He cannot act. He
really can't. He really can't. But like,
with the best and he clearly has only seen one small part of the reviews of his character, because there's a heck of a lot of people out there who are saying terrible things about it. So either it's being filtered or he's only choosing to look at half of it. But it just seems strange that, I mean, I can't wait to see how all this comes together. He's promising us that it's all going to make sense and come together. I'm waiting for it, John.
John Bishop is smiling, but I'm not particularly convinced.
If it does all come together and make sense in a way that he can understand it, because he doesn't look like somebody who can understand science fiction plots so easily, it's going to be so simplistic and boring. It's going to be unbelievable.
Well, either that, or it is just a mere acceptance that everybody kind of knows Doctor Who doesn't make sense. And we've been talking about this, right the way through the classic days. Again, this isn't anything new. Everybody always used to say, don't understand what on earth's going on. This is viewers and productions crew and actors. Nobody ever really. So are we just using it as an excuse now? Oh, it's Doctor Who. It doesn't have to make sense. So when John Bishop says, don't worry, it all comes together, it makes sense, presumably he means in a Doctor Who-y kind of way. In other words, it doesn't make sense at all. But that's okay, because we're all having a good time with it. And yet, back in the day, it wasn't so problematic if Doctor Who didn't make sense, because actually you look at some of the best stories that didn't make sense, and it doesn't matter because they're done with such conviction and such love, and they're just damn good rollicking tales that you cut it some slack and you don't mind that it doesn't necessarily make sense. This, unfortunately, needs to make sense because it's not interesting. The route is not interesting, so the destination had better be damned good to explain this boring route.
Yeah, and it's coming at a time that is absolutely crucial in the show's history. I mean, okay, you could say there are people out there, again, in the fan base that are receiving this, particularly the ratings, which we're going to come to in a short while, are receiving this as if to say, it doesn't matter what goes on screen, it doesn't really matter how it's received, because Doctor Who's future is assured. And I hear that. But in my view, complacency like that we cannot let that be a strategy. We cannot let stuff like this, crap like this, get past us as a fan base, and let the BBC be, in any terms, receiving the idea that this is good enough for license fee payers, or just from people who want to be engaged by a bit of storytelling.
That's right. Because again, if you're going to take that approach, again, all the production team is doing with Doctor Who is treading water. And that's why I use this term really, really specifically, because that's what episode 3 felt like. It felt like treading water between the best Doctor Who episode we've had in a while and the episode 4, whatever that turns out to be. It's just treading water. And that, as you say, Dan, is a waste of license fee payers' time and money, and it's not right.
And audience goodwill. I mean,
yes.
I've got a certain amount of sympathy for the guest cast. The main cast, not so much. But everybody involved. None at all. But everybody involved on the cast of this, they seem to me now, John Bishop may be smiling there, but during episode 3, Once Upon a Time, they seem to me little more than crash test dummies. They've got blank expressions on their faces. Yeah. They're strapped in. They're contractually obliged. Clearly no idea what they're either doing or saying. Sometimes no idea who they're even saying them back to or what's going on throughout this. And you've got Jodie Whittaker, who, as you've rightly said, she is in a lot of this episode compared to very little of the previous ones. She's trying to bring this gravitas and to anchor it. But it's kind of like... when you're over the park and you watch a Jack Russell trying to eat one of those big leather footballs, it's going to get nowhere and convince no one to the point where it's not really worth it. It's not really worth them carrying on. It just looks funnier and funnier the more they do it. The entire episode is a massive catastrophe, huge overreach from a writer like Chris Chibnall, just based on the fact that he managed to string people along for 10 weeks of Broadchurch for a year once 8 years ago.
Yes. And the interesting thing is, as I say, if you want to tell the kind of episode that he was telling in episode 3, which is this weird, abstract, absurd thing, that's fine, but you've got to make it interesting and engaging so that people will at least sit and watch it and say, well, I haven't got a clue what's going on, but it's great fun, it's brilliant. But this was the fundamental problem. Nothing about episode 3 was great fun. Just wasn't. So it's boring.
Well, one thing that Doctor Who fans love to do is to speculate. And we're going to speculate in a little while when we come back about one aspect of this episode in particular. More rumours are out there floating around, and I'm wondering if you've heard them too. But we're going to shoot off to a parallel dimension of our own now, filled with unmissable geeky talk and amazing analysis, courtesy of our friends on all the other shows across the Fandom Podcast Network. Here's a few words about all of that. Then we'll be back with more of our review of this 3rd episode of Doctor Who Flux. Stay tuned.
Thank you for listening. We hope you're enjoying this podcast. We like to continue to feed your ears by inviting you to listen to these other great shows on the Fandom Podcast Network. It starts with our flagship show, Culture Clash, discussing the latest in entertainment pop culture. Bloody Kings, Immortals Take Notice, our show covering the entire Highlander universe. Couch Potato Theaters, where we celebrate our favorite movies. Time Warp, the Fandom Flashback podcast discussing a year in movies and our favorite retro movie and TV pop culture topics. Good Evening, discussing all things Alfred Hitchcock. Union Federation, our Star Trek and Orville show. Hair Metal, the 80s and early 90s rock metal podcast. Type 40, our show covering the time-traveling Doctor Who universe with host Dan Hadley. Lethal Mullet, an 80s and 90s action film podcast with host Adam P. O'Brien. Also check out the Lethal Mullet Network for more great podcasts. What a Piece of Junk, a Star Wars podcast with hosts Scott, Derek, and Nathan. Making Treks, a Star Trek podcast, a deep dive into the final frontier with host Mark Newbold and Adam P. O'Brien. And check out our newest shows, The Fandom Show, our monthly Fandom Podcast Network live YouTube exclusive show about the month's hottest topics in fandom, and the FPN True Believers MCU podcast, discussing the Marvel Cinematic Universe and the related Marvel television and streaming MCU universe, including the connections to the original Marvel comics. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on several platforms. Please subscribe to the Fandom Podcast Network YouTube channel to receive notifications of new podcast episodes and live events. You can enjoy all of the Fandom Podcast Network audio podcasts on our master feed at fpnet.podbean.com. The Fandom Podcast Network is on all major podcast platforms, including Apple Podcast and iTunes. You can find the Fandom Podcast Network on Facebook. You can email us at fandompodcastnetwork@gmail.com. You can also find the Fandom Podcast Network on Instagram at Fandom Podcast Network and on Twitter at FanPod Network. Thank you for listening, and remember, respect others and enjoy your fandom.
Yes, we've teased and tantalised you again there, and we can even clothe you too. There's merch to match all of those shows, including Type 40. If you head over to the TeePublic.com store, search for the Fandom Podcast Network, and you'll see shelves full of the team colours for all of those shows on everything from the T-shirts to phone cases, tapestries, mugs. Seeing is believing. Treat yourself, treat your other selves, and it all goes to support the Fandom Podcast Network into the bargain. At least some things in the universe still make sense, gentlemen. So I'm still here with Simon and the Rabbi, rooted to the spot, eager to continue this journey through Once Upon Time with me, this time on Type 40. But we've a big question that we've avoided, and a big cast member who had very little amount of screen time in Once Upon Time, but she was there nonetheless. I'm talking about the British actress Barbara Flynn, who, now I'd sort of forgotten about this midweek. Barbara plays a character called, okay, here we go again, Orsock. Where does Chris Chibnall?
Because they're all sucks. That's why. That's where it came from, because they're all sucks. There you go.
It just rolls off the tongue, everybody. So this is Orsock. This little old lady, cute little old lady. Now,
Yeah.
She appeared in just one scene with Jodie Whittaker's Doctor, where 1 minute Jodie is talking to those sort of great big sort of curtain-clad alien beings, whoever they're supposed to be. So she's talking to one sort of faceless alien being outside of the universe, and then gets immediately sort of pushed into another sideways universe or memory or whatever to talk to another nameless character who's talking utter nonsense too. Not confusing at all.
That we're supposed to care about.
We're supposed to relate to this person. It's great to see Barbara Flynn in Doctor Who. I've always loved her. I loved her in Cracker. I loved her in A Very Peculiar Practice. All those shows. She's great.
Yeah.
She was good. At least she was proficient, as an actor.
Yeah.
Yeah, like she could sell the scene.
Well, yeah, and you were kind of left there thinking, oh, I wish she was the Doctor and not Jodie Whittaker, but anyway.
Oh, yes!
I did feel that. How many lines did she have? And she was immediately commanding in them. Got so much charisma about her. She's a great actress.
Yeah.
But
she was interesting to watch. This is the other thing. She was interesting to watch in those. She was on screen for 90 seconds or something, and she was interesting to watch. And Jodie, that could learn a lot from that. You just want somebody interesting to watch.
Jodie can't learn anything from anyone. If she could, she would have done by now. But she's not dead. No.
Now, I immediately noticed when this went out, because there's been precious little in Doctor Who history has survived the oncoming sort of destructive intergalactic interdimensional force that is Chris Chibnall's own lack of writing ability. Just sort of eats up lore and spits it all out to the point where you end up staring back over your shoulder. And it's just in a mass pile of goo that doesn't even resemble the thing that it looked like 10 minutes earlier. But there are elements to Doctor Who lore that do exist outside of what he's managed to mangle already. And one of them is the idea of immortal beings that exist outside of space and time. Now, on one hand, this could be another character like Grace that Barbara Flynn's playing. It could be somebody in a dream or in a memory that the Doctor simply doesn't remember. But, I immediately noticed this because I've been expecting it for a while. And sure enough, certain fan sites, would you call them? Unofficial websites, fan commentators have also talked about this character, about who she may be. And the word out there is that Barbara Flynn, oh God, can't even pronounce her name now. Barbara Flynn's character could be the White Guardian, who first appeared in the Key to Time saga, as I'm sure that you guys know, and then again in 1983 in what they call the Black Guardian trilogy. So originally, this was obviously played by a male actor. And Yeah, I've been expecting the concept of the Black and White Guardians to return to Doctor Who at some point in the future for a number of years now, because the idea is that they are these two sort of equal elemental forces, aren't they, that keep everything in the universe in check. So it's the balance between good and evil. It's a very simple concept, one that it's in lots of classical literature, isn't it? It's a very basic idea that we see in fiction, literature, and religion, pretty much the whole world over. Sort of classical ideas, really. And this is Doctor Who's variation of it.
Is it evil or chaos versus order? The Black and White Guardian.
I think it's the latter.
Same, isn't it? It's black.
Well, no. If it's chaos versus order, they could both be ambiguously shaped.
Because the Black Guardian always said that the Doctor's evil is my good. That's what he said to Turlough, wasn't it? So yeah, your description is probably a lot more accurate. So yeah, people have latched onto this that Barbara is playing the White Guardian. I said to somebody only a few weeks ago that I expected Chris Chibnall to cast. It seems somewhat unkind now. To cast a cut-priced Judi Dench as the White Guardian.
Boy, did you call that? You call that? Yes.
Sorry, Barbara, I do love you, but I was pretty much on the money there. And I'll say this now, when the Black Guardian does appear, and I'm confident that she will, she'll be played by... Well, my choice would be Frances de la Tour, but I think that easy money is on... I'll go back to my default setting, which is with Chris Chibnall casting, look down the list of people who were in Broadchurch and pick the person he hasn't used yet. So I think he'll go for Charlotte Rampling. If he can
oh, Lord.
I know who... No, if it's a bad guy, evil people can only be white males, right? So it's probably Craig Parkinson.
Oh, that's true.
Oh,
you're
now
right.
that... Good call, Rabbi. Good call.
You're right. It will be a male. The Black Guardian will be male. Yeah, that would make sense.
Okay, so we've got no confirmation. This may all be total fan speculation and fan fiction. But as you've established, Simon, this entire episode is fan fiction. Yeah. So do you believe that Barbara is playing the White Guardian? How likely do you think this is? Does this interest you in any way? Let me know your thoughts.
No, it doesn't interest me in the slightest. I really don't give two stuffs. Put it like this. If she's not the White Guardian, okay, I don't care. If she is the White Guardian, okay, I don't care. Either way, it's literally of no interest in me at all. I pray that she isn't the White Guardian for the simple fact that I will be so boilingly angry that yet again, we have a male role repurposed to now be female. So I am praying for that reason alone it's not the White Guardian. And to be clear again, we've got to be really precise in this. I'm not against females in dramas. Of course I'm not. I'm very, very pro having females in dramas and roles for women. Of course I am. But we should not be repurposing roles in the same way that they wouldn't bring back the Rani as a male and they wouldn't bring back Romana as a male. And quite rightly so, because the Rani is female and Romana is female, just the same as the White Guardian is male. So can we, that's my one reason for praying that Barbara Flynn is not playing the White Guardian.
Yeah,
Rabbi,
I don't think your prayer's going to be answered, mate. Although the answer's going to be no. You're not going to get what you want. Like, who would have thought that you would have missed the silly bird heads?
The thing that's frustrating with all this, of course, is that Barbara Flynn would make an excellent White Guardian, would have been brilliant had we, if we're going back to 1978 and instead of Cyril Luckham, we'd had Barbara Flynn as the White Guardian. Brilliant. I've got no problem with that. She'd be great. Of course she would. So, we've got to be really precise here where the problem is. The problem for me is in rewriting, again, a male role for a woman. And as we've said so many times before, no, just start creating some really good female roles and stop repurposing what were already good male roles. That's all I'm saying.
The trouble is they can't write anything good because these are all talentless hacks. And you can tell they're talentless hacks because they hide behind this insane ideology. Yeah, you had to give a disclaimer like, of course I'm not against women.
You have to do that.
Yeah,
you have to. Could you imagine if we could bottle all that energy that we've had to go in saying the bleeding bloody obvious that we've all known all our bloody lives? If we could collect it, we could power. There'll be end of the power crisis or whatever crisis we got. But it's insane. Yeah. But she's probably the White Guardian. I mean, it probably
I'd say
is,
so.
isn't it?
I mean, the way I see it, what clinches it for me, even though there's no texture really in the story, but this is a Chris Chibnall story. We're never going to get texture. We're never going to get anything that's going to really make any discernible sense. So it's 100% what's on screen. Barbara Flynn, she's got grey hair anyway, so why dye her hair bright white? Why is she wearing the sort of straw hat that's synonymous with the White Guardian as seen in the Rebus
the
operation?
straw hat! That's what that was about. Oh, well done.
Yeah.
You know,
And the thing
why
is,
otherwise?
and the thing is that's actually frustrating is there's a fanish part of me that thinks, yeah, actually, I'd like to see the White Guardian back, and I have actually no problem with Barbara Flynn playing the role at all because as we've already said, she's doing it brilliantly. So there's part of me, but unfortunately, I think I've been so turned against the Chibnall era for so many reasons that there is just that part of me that just rankles with. And so if this was an isolated incident of a repurposing of a male role, I wouldn't have a problem with it at all. But because we've had, certainly through season 11 and 12, we had agendas shoved down our throat, if you will pardon the expression, that you now become resistant to the idea. So what might have been a good idea at the time, I'm just resistant to now. And that's a shame because I don't want to feel like that because, there's a fanish part of me that thinks, wow, it'd be great if it's the White Guardian. Of course it would. The White Guardian's a great character, as is the Black Guardian. So bring it on.
And the truth is that Chris Chibnall has left himself nowhere to go. I mean, he's destroyed Doctor Who lore. He's destroyed the Time Lords again. And so he set this in motion as well, this huge intergalactic, interdimensional thing called the Flux raging across the universe, doing whatever. There's nobody left, nothing left outside of that to intervene in any way, apart from the Guardians themselves.
Yeah, but again, it's interesting because again, the public aren't going to give two stuffs. They don't know who the White and Black Guardian are.
Exactly.
So it's purely for the fans. It is purely for fans. And so yet again, we're back at fan fiction. Now that's okay. Nobody's saying you can't do that. They brought back, for rightly or wrongly, in the Turlough trilogy, they brought back the Black and White Guardian then, and many would argue it was a bad move, and arguably it possibly was a bad move because it was very much aimed at the fans and not at the public, and quite rightly the public really couldn't give two stuffs. But it all depends on how it's done and and how incidental or how important it is to the main thrust of the story. And this is what I come back to. If the story itself is really engaging and is really cracking and is told with great verve and confidence by the writer, by the director, by the cast, by the crew, if you've got that and it's just a rollicking, damn good adventure, to an extent it doesn't matter who you bring back or who you don't bring back. At the end of the day, that's the key to this, is are you making good television? And if you're not, then it doesn't matter who you bring back, who you kill off. It's not going to be interesting and it's not engaging. And that to me was the prime crime of episode 3. None of it was interesting. None of it was engaging. So that's why I don't really care whether it's the White Guardian or not, because it won't be good. It won't be interesting. It won't be well told. It's just going to be boring again. As
expected, there was another ratings fall for the third episode. Overnight ratings for Once Upon Time, it was down to 3.76 million viewers. That's another drop from the previous week's 3.96 million. So it's not as big a drop as the 500,000 before, but hey, it's still a drop. The audience are deserting this show, Simon, either chunk by chunk or bit by bit. And as you say, bear in mind that War of the Sontarans was reasonably strong and looked like Doctor Who. One cannot help but wonder, after this atrocity, what's it going to look like next week?
Yeah, I'm predicting a large fall. And of course, again, to be clear, Doctor Who has always traditionally fell during the course of the season. Generally, it always goes down. So we can't claim, oh, this is the only time Doctor Who has fallen during season. Of course it hasn't. Unfortunately, it's just started low and it's going lower. It's certainly not building on its audience, that's for sure. And an episode.
Dan, if you want to share the picture I just put up, it's the ratings of the Jodie Whittaker era.
Oh yes, so this is your graphic. You've been charting this, haven't you, for the last couple of years, and you've got some really interesting stats and predictions about what may come.
So this is the stat. You see, it got a little bump when everybody got locked in their homes and they couldn't leave, and and it was raining out. So that did well for it, and that had lots of Daleks. That did well for it. So my prediction for this episode was for episode 2 was 5.15. It came in a little bit under that for 5.10. So I think the ratings for the consolidated ratings for Once Upon Time will be we're probably looking at if the bump it gets from the 7 day it remains the same, it will be 4.9. I think it's probably going to lose a lot. So I'm saying it's going to be between 4.6, 4.9. The overnights, however, I think if they get over 3.2, they should be very, very thankful. And 3.2, of course, will be the lowest overnights I think they've got.
What was last week's episode again? Overnights
3.76.
3.76. Do we have the We've got the consolidated rating as well for War of Sontarans, haven't we? Now, what was that?
Yeah, 510.
510. Oh, that's 510. I see. Yeah. Okay then.
That includes that's the 4-screen rating. The 4-screen is complete BS. It's
heavily massaged figures there. They read every 2-minute watch on any kind of device as a view. Don't take the 4-screen figure remotely seriously. It's fine, I suppose, if they want, for their purposes, for stats, looking where the future may lie, the future of broadcasting, whatever. But as regards a rating, a real rating that's any indicator as to the popularity of the show and how it's retaining audience, you may as well not even bother, that I can see.
And is that your prediction there of 3.23 as an overnight for Once Upon Time? Then is that how I?
No, that's for the last episode, right? That's just if the trend continues. That's where it's going to end up. That's the consolidated rating, not the overnight.
I see.
So if the 4 remains constant, that's what we're looking at. I don't think it's going to be that low, but if it is, I will laugh. it will make me giggle. But
the thing that's quite terrifying is if you are right with that 3.23 as an estimate for a consolidated rating for episode 3, that means that for episode 4. I apologise for episode 4.
Episode 6.
Oh, is this episode 6 we're looking at? Okay,
3.23 is 6. 3.63 is 5. 4.08.
I see. That's where we're going to end up at, basically. I mean, I really think that we will lose at least 500,000 for episode 4 at minimum, because I just think people will turn off in droves. I'm almost tempted to think it might even go below 3 million.
The negative reception to Once Upon a Time was audibly large. And for a show with, that's audience has dwindled to this extent, whose cultural impact has lessened to such a degree, the fact that the dissatisfaction was heard the way it was, wafting from the general public and from the press and the fan press, that would seem to me to indicate that we're about to. That's the iceberg we can see out of the window of the Titanic, about to hit. One thing that's been very difficult to locate the last couple of weeks have been the BBC America ratings, almost as if they're so low they've stopped compiling them at all. But no, you
just need to take your socks off to use your toes.
But we have got the figures here. So the first week it had been down noticeably again to 0.339 million. We got the figure here for week 2, War of the Sontarans as well, which hadn't been published when we recorded the last show. That recorded a 0.305 figure. I mean, this is a tiny percentage of the figure that it was getting under Peter Capaldi, let alone under Matt Smith. But week 3, there was a slight increase, believe it or not, for Once Upon a Time.
I am convinced quality affects the ratings. I am absolutely convinced about that.
So you say they saw War of the Sontarans.
the ratings won't be as terrible.
It certainly looks like that's what's happened here, because they did go up again to 0.337.
I mean, it went up to 0.337 out of a country of 60 million people.
That is shocking. Even more shocking, even more telling was the AAI figure here in the UK. Now, we spoke about this last time on the show. The Audience Appreciation Index figure is the measure of how much the audience simply enjoyed the show. So it's a score out of 100 compiled by a specially selected panel of around 5,000 people who go online to a secure location, leave their comment and leave their score. These figures have been compiled. They've been compiled for several years, for decades, in fact, but only in this way since the new series of Doctor Who. So the figures that we have that stretch back through the classic show are not compatible with new series figures. That's why we only talk in terms of the new series figures. And Once Upon Time did record the lowest audience appreciation figure for Doctor Who in this current way of assembling the figures. It recorded the lowest one ever of
Who'd have thought
75.
Who would have thought it? Staggering, isn't it?
I would. I think 75, they're doing good.
Exactly, of course. And so basically, everything that we've been saying in this show is basically echoed by what's happening out with the general public. They're taking exactly the same approach. This isn't us, as we are often accused of, just being grumpy old dinosaurs knocking the modern show. The general public, as you said earlier, Dan, the general public have fallen out of love with it. It's very, very clear. They don't like it anymore. What can you say?
So for whilst I'm sure there are people out there who may be saying, but what about this? But what about that? I'm afraid that all earlier figures are incompatible. This figure, as recorded for Once Upon Time, is the lowest recorded audience appreciation index figure in Doctor Who history. Now, I wasn't surprised at all. Obviously, we're Doctor Who fans. I don't like seeing the show dragged through the mud like this. I don't like seeing these indignities getting clocked one by one by one, but it is a reality. And yeah, okay, Bad Wolf and Russell T Davies, that is happening. But these images, these stats, this taste that we're being left with in our mouths is going to sit for the best part of 2 years. You've got a couple of specials between now and then. It's all over already. So those specials are neither here nor there, really. This is Doctor Who as we have known it since 2005. This is this era, this production playing out and dying on its feet, on its knees, in fact.
Yeah, and the thing is, you see, we're sitting here for an hour and a half, sort of analysing this. The general public doesn't do this. They don't care. They just either tune in and they like something, or they tune out if they don't like it. So it doesn't. There's no. They can't justify it in any way. They're either going to enjoy it and watch it, or they're not. They're not critical in the way that we are being critical, and we're analysing every tiny minutiae of the show, and that's a problem because you as a result, because the general public is simply less discerning than us from a point of view of the minutiae of whether it follows Doctor Who lore, etc., and is it the white guardian? They don't care about any of that. They just want to know whether they're enjoying the show or not. And so if they're not enjoying it, and they're clearly not enjoying it, it's going to fall below their radar. They're not bothered. As you just said, Dan, we don't want to see it being dragged through the mud. We don't want to see it failing like this. The general public don't care whether it's dragged through the mud or it fails. They just either enjoy it or they don't. They're far more ambivalent than we as fans are. And that's to say that's bad, because it's going to fall out of their sphere of influence. They don't care anymore, and it'll fall just as it did towards the end of the original classic run under JNT. For better or worse, it didn't resonate with the public, and they just stopped caring about it. They're not bothered about it anymore, whether it's on or not.
I think history has repeated itself in an accelerated way, and you're right. The general public is all out of F's to give about this.
Yeah, they're indifferent.
Yeah. And, I think about what I witnessed last Sunday, and, we talked a little bit about the plot, but it doesn't seem really worth going into because Chris Chibnall doesn't bother. Why the hell should I? I'm certainly not going to rewatch this. I think I'd rather rewatch my wife give birth to my twins for 45 to 50 minutes, and that was agonising, and that was totally gross. I'd rather rewatch that.
I would say I'd rather watch this, quite frankly. It's, no offence to any family members, but especially if you're going to be down the business end.
I've got a front row seat. But yeah, so let's look back at Once Upon a Time, and I'm afraid the time has come. Chris, if you are listening, if you're watching, how many multiple versions of Yaz do you score this one at 5, Rabbi?
Oh, blimey. I mean, it's tough because it was awful. But again, Orphan 55, Can You Hear Me? Can You Hear Me? That was my lowest moment in Doctor Who ever. And I can't believe I was upset by that point. But so let's say that's a minus 6,072, right? So let's make this a 0. Give it a nice round 0.
I am simply not going to give it a score because it doesn't deserve a score. It doesn't even deserve a 0. It deserves nothing at all. I wouldn't even waste my brain cells trying to think of a score because it doesn't deserve one. No score.
You know what? I have to say that I'm with you both. I can't bring myself to even give this a 1. I thought it was absolutely abysmal. And the latest of several low points in the show's history.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really see how it can get much worse. But
hold my beard!
It's interesting.
Although episode 4 is widely tipped to be the best of this season.
Mm-hmm.
Which, if it's better than War of the Sontarans, I mean, as long as they keep Jodie out of it. Look, by the time this airs, we'll have known. But the trick is minimizing Jodie and minimizing Jodie, basically minimizing Jodie and just like doing stuff so you don't notice how bad it is, right? So episode 4 is supposed to be the best, but I think 5 and 6 are going to be unbelievable.
And the thing that's interesting there is that something that we haven't talked about is the fact that in series 11 and series 12, Chibnall steadfastly refused to bring back returning foes, returning monsters. And yet in Flux, in 3 episodes, he has literally thrown every possible returning monster he can, a returning foe, the White Guardian as well, if we're correct on the White Guardian. He's just thrown everything at it. And is this just sheer desperation on his part of thinking?
Yes, it's sheer desperation and terror.
Nothing has worked. Or has the BBC said to him, for goodness sakes, just throw some old monsters at it? I don't know. It's just interesting to know what would be going on behind the scene. Either way, it's very marked that everything has been thrown at these 3 episodes. Everything.
Simon, you used the expression earlier, and I think it's as true for this particular episode as it is for certainly Series 13 and maybe the entire era. I don't know. After he cast a female treading water, I think that's exactly what's going on.
That's what the whole property is doing right now. They're trying to make it. They're hoping it won't be damaged anymore before Rusty David comes back.
They're literally hoping it won't sink.
I was just going to say, we're looking at this publicity image. We've seen lots and lots of these publicity stills of all these like very colourful strands intermingling. Yeah. We're halfway through. We haven't even seen anything vaguely like this. For God's sake! I mean, we should have some weird connection. No,
on the first edition of these shows, of these review shows, I got Charlotte and Kylan, and we were talking about that, and I put it out there that maybe these ribbons are meant to represent the rags from the Ghost Monument. And that those sort of grey rags that were inside the Doctor's mind, if you remember when this whole stupid arc started, that they represent that in some way, and that they're going to reappear towards, if not the end of Flux, then maybe in the special that winds it all down. And they said that I was trying to apply logic and reason and artistic.
They're making a good point. They're making a good point.
To Chris Chibnall's work, and that was a major folly on my part. So I just took the rap on the old knuckles and chose not to mention it again.
Well,
but that's the only thing that I've got, Rabbi.
And the truth of it is, although I hate these graphics with a passion, the truth of it is, it looks far more interesting than the actual third episode.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that's
it does. I want to watch that as opposed to episode 3 again.
Well, Doctor Who does continue on BBC One in the UK, on BBC One in America for the very few people out there that are still watching for the next couple of weeks, and we'll be here with further reviews. We'll see who else I can pull in to help me through Chris Chibnall's opus of oblivion here on Type 40. Doctor Who Flux, such as it is released on Blu-ray, believe it or not. Blu-ray and DVD, and in a steelbook featuring this beautiful art by Alex X. Zhang. That's out on the 22nd of January 2022, everybody. That's going to be $37.99 on steelbook and Blu-ray, and $17.99 on the standard Blu-ray for the people out there, for the completists who can't wait to get Flux on your shelves. There's no account of a taste, is there? And I thought I was bad. Yeah, but that is the old girl starting up and calling time on this trip in our TARDIS. I'll be back with another Type 40. Look out for that wherever you found this. It could have been on the dedicated home for Type 40, type40.podbean.com, or over on Spotify, TuneIn, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, iHeart Radio, Stitcher, Podbay, all the other various places that we've been popping up this year. Every time I think I've got them all clocked, there's another one. Maybe you saw us over on the Fandom Podcast Network's Master Feed. We're still there too, of course we are. Or on YouTube, on the Spacebook YouTube channel, the world's largest streaming platform. And we're there with video versions of every podcast, unedited and raw. If you'd like to get in touch with us and have your say, there's our social media, Instagram and Twitter at Type40Doctor or you can email us, type40doctorwho@gmail.com. And if you're feeling really brave, there's always the opportunity to take a real-time trip in the Type 40 for everyday extra-dimensional chit-chat in the Type 40 Facebook group. Simon, where can people get in touch with you on social media?
They can come and find me on Facebook, although, to be honest, I'm kind of getting to the temptation where I might just come off Facebook because I've had so many brickbats thrown at me for daring to say that the episode 3 was the worst in 58 years. So I'm not sure how long I'll be on Facebook. It's
always the case. The worse the show gets and the more we point it out, there are always people out there who spit the dummy the farthest.
Exactly. So I
don't understand why people are upset by after anybody not liking it or it not being popular, right? Doctor Who was not popular when I loved it in the 80s. I think Smith McCoy is some of the best stories I've seen. Very unpopular. And I was like, in school, it wasn't the way to get the ladies to show you the Doctor Who magazine.
Not, mate. Definitely not.
It wasn't very. It didn't do the. But like, what's their bloody problem? You know, I'm glad you like it. God bless you, like it. Okay.
Exactly. I'm glad you like
I think it's garbage. What do you want out of me? It's like. I'm sorry, it's an intolerable point of view for you. But
head over to the Hoonatics on Facebook.
Yes,
and,
the Hoonatics on Facebook. Yeah, for how long I don't know.
You can't say that. It's been since 1987. No. You must exist in some way, shape, or form. And Rabbi, what's going on your YouTube channel at the moment? What you got coming up in the next couple of weeks?
Join me on Sundays at 8 o'clock UK time, where I do a full recap of the episode. I watch it so you don't have to, right? I go over the whole thing. And then on Monday, I do a far more in-depth one. I get screen grab. Like the last episode 3, I got like over 150 screen grabs, and go for it slowly. We go through the line by line. It's agony, right? It's agony. We go over the ratings, and we do pretty much a deep dive. So that's on Sundays and Mondays. I'm doing the same thing with Star Trek Discovery, which I think is going to be might be worse. Might actually be worse. So we're going to find out. And then during the week, I'm normally screaming at the camera about whatever outrage is going on at the time. Live streams on Tuesdays, Thursdays, or Sundays now, and Saturdays. Couple of videos every day. Come on by. A fun time.
Well, you know that you're my favourite YouTuber, and in my opinion, the content that you put out is the most consistent, the most entertaining, the most creative, and certainly the loudest Doctor Who content on YouTube.
I can't argue with the man when he's right, can I?
Head over to the Rabbi from Another Planet's YouTube channel. Don't miss any of that. You can find me on social media, on Twitter and Instagram as the Spacebook, where I am wheezing and groaning at sharing and posting about all things geeky inside and outside of the TARDIS, and looking forward to a geeky Christmas in the next. Somebody's just told me yesterday, it's like 5 weeks until Christmas as of recording. I can't quite believe it. I'm nowhere near prepared. So I'm going to be trying to get myself into the Christmas spirit there by posting pictures of Raymond Briggs and Only Fools and Horses Christmas specials and all those kind of things. So look out for that on Twitter and Instagram. But that's it this time. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for watching. My thanks to you for listening. We always have the time if you have the space here at Type 40. But that's it for now. Take care. We'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.